Alright, what's going on, guys? And I know what you're thinking. You clicked this video thinking to yourself, what the heck is this guy on about? How can a card being banned in Standard affect the 2020 Challenger decks? Well, let's talk about it. First off, in order to understand the issue here, you must first understand how these decks are produced. And if you want some insight into that, I highly recommend the Professor's video. He actually interviewed Gavin Verhey, and it's very insightful. You know, it's a discussion with someone at Wizard, so there's lots of kind of non-answers and the skirting of questions and whatnot, but there is some insight here. And one of the things he talks about is how long it takes to produce Challenger decks and how he wishes they could produce them faster.
The only problem with Challenger decks is that they come out so late. Why can't we get Challenger decks sooner? Why aren't these out in January?
Here's the deal. It takes us a long time to make a Magic set or any kind of product. And with Challenger decks, we worked really hard to chop down the processes as far as we could to get down to the bare minimum of 5 months. Okay, the minimum it takes for these guys is 5 months. So from the moment we send the final files out to the people who are printing the cards to the moment they show up in your game store is about 5 months or so, okay? Give or take a week here or there.
So here's a rundown. Standard rotates in October, and for the first few weeks of the new Standard environment, it's just too chaotic to know which decks are good and which ones aren't. I've actually talked about that in previous videos, what to expect after rotation, but after Standard rotates, the first few weeks are just very up in the air. The format needs time to settle, and the metagame needs to establish itself before Wizards of the Coast can have any idea what decks are good enough to be printed as Challenger decks. And usually when they start deciding what decks to print is around the first Mythic Championship. For example, last year the United Assault deck was modeled after LSV's Mythic Championship deck. They mentioned that in the article when they, announced the 2019 Challenger decks. They said that the United Assault deck was based off of LSV's Mythic Championship deck. So we know for the first month of Standard, basically these things aren't being touched at all. They're just waiting. They're waiting for the format to settle. They're waiting to see what decks emerge on the professional scene so they know which decks are good enough to be Challenger decks. So we can assume that these aren't even really touched or mentioned or talked about too much until November-ish. Now, Challenger decks are typically released in April, which means there's about a 5-month period between the Mythic Championship and the release day. And keep in mind that there's production time, right? Wizards can't just snap their fingers and make these just magically appear. They have to be printed, they have to be boxed, they have to be packed and stored in a warehouse until they're ready to be shipped out all across the world to, local game stores and whatnot. So there's time, right? There is a production time that you have to think that at least these have to be shipped out, at a minimum, at least a couple weeks before release, which means they need to be fully printed before that. And, it's just, there's time in that. We have to assume that these have to be done, at least a month or two before the release date. So there's a 6-month period between when Standard rotates until release date, but you have to shave off a month or two at the beginning because we're waiting for Standard to settle down, and you have to shave off a couple months at the end because of just, the physical production time of, mass printing this stuff. So basically what I'm saying is the team that works on these actually has a very short window to actually make these. So even though Wizards of the Coast gets lots of criticism for the time these take to be released, there is a reason for it. They have to wait at least a month, and there is production time. So it does take time to produce these. It makes sense. So what the heck does that have to do with Oko? Well, here's the problem. Oko destroyed the format for the first month of Eldraine Standard, and since he was banned nearly a month after Eldraine was released, Wizards of the Coast basically lost a month of time in creating these. Oko was banned right after the Mythic Championship, and normally that would be the time where Wizards of the Coast would be looking at the results and, starting to pick which decks are going to be Challenger decks. But now, Oko got banned right at that time, and then the format was completely in chaos again, which means that Wizards of the Coast needs to wait another month or so, or at least until the next Mythic Championship to be absolutely sure which decks are good. So there was already a really small window for these to be produced, and then that got, basically a month of it shaved off because the first month of the format is pointless. None of that matters. We basically started afresh. Essentially, Standard rotated at the beginning of November when Oko got banned, which means that, Wizards of the Coast had to wait until the next Mythic Championship to get a good idea of what's good. So yeah, I just thought that was worth noting. It's kind of interesting. I don't really know what's going to happen. We can only wait and see, but you know, there is a chance that either A, these are going to be more rushed just because there was a smaller window of time to make them, or they're going to have to delay the release date by a couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. These might be released in early May instead of late April because of the Oko ban. And I see no reason to be negative or positive. I'm not here to say that these are going to be ruined. I'm not here to say that they're going to be fine. I just thought it was notable that the banning of Oko could actually affect the challenger decks. Don't know if it'll be negative. I don't know if it'll be positive, but you know, it's noteworthy. And it could be positive because if Wizards of the Coast has to kind of rush these closer to the release date, then maybe the decks will be more up to date. Whereas before, maybe they kind of finished them a little bit earlier and maybe the decks kind of changed over the course of a couple weeks and the decks were a little bit more out of date. Like the United Assault one, for example. The United Assault deck last year had the life gain package that by the time United Assault was released, the mono white deck in competitive Magic wasn't really playing that life gain package at all. So yeah, it could be a positive change. We don't really know. I'm not here to say that one way or the other, but I just thought I would mention that. Oko was a terrible card. I mean, it was a really good card, but it was a terrible card for Magic. It's been kind of a disaster in every format. Well, a lot of formats. We'll say that. A lot of formats have been negatively impacted by Oko, in my opinion. And yeah, it extends beyond just the fun of the format. It has, you know, more effects than people might think. Like, for example, actually affecting the challenger decks. So there's just no end to Oko's mischief in this game, I guess we can say. You know, what can you do? I have a lot of faith that these will still be good. It's just, I basically just wanted to make a video complaining about Oko some more because, what a disaster that card was. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.